All right. Hello, everybody. Good day, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're at. I'm Aurora, and welcome to this first ever Aurora Claire Streams interview. In this case, with a very fabulous Banff local, Jessia Arsenio. We've got a lot of really important, really big, really heavy topics to discuss. So right off the bat, I want to put All right. Hello, everybody. Good day, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're at. I'm Aurora, let's mute those sites. There we go. So, sorry about that. Uh, I I want to put a content warning on it. We're going to be talking, frankly, about drug use and overdose and things that are heavy and you may have a personal reaction to. So we're going to put a content warning on this entire stream. Then, before we go one step further, I want to do a land acknowledgement. I am coming to you today from Treaty 7 lands. I live on the side of Sacred Buffalo Guardian Mountain, a place where nobody was supposed to live ever. It's a sacred place, and yet we live here in many ways in violation of the truth and reconciliation and everything that we're supposedly working towards. And I think this is extra important now with this news from the Kamloops Residential School, the 215 children found murdered, which is just horrific. It's horrific, and maybe it's not surprising at all, and maybe it shouldn't be surprising, and yet it is still horrific, and a thing that was done in many of our names, which is shocking. And I want to take a moment to just have us all sit with that. This is a land acknowledgement after, and when we acknowledge something like we're on the land that belongs to somebody else, that necessitates action, doesn't it? Right? We can't just acknowledge that we stole something and then move on, right? And so I want to, at least in this moment, take a moment for us all to sit in that and understand our relation to that and what we are doing at that, and how we benefit from the colonial system and what we are doing to dismantle it. All right. Um, so I'm going to introduce our guest today, and then I'm going to actually answer a little bit more of that question I just asked all of you. So our guest today is Jessia Arsenio. He is a local writer, community organizer, activist, and really, really intelligent, insightful, a smart person. And I am so pleased to have him here. And so there he is. There is Jessia. Welcome, Jessia. How's it going today? I feel like you're compelled to say that, though. Yeah. I wanted to bring you on because we are both doing our work right now. This is my work. This is your work. This is a thing that in most cases you and I would ask for money for. And today, what I want everybody to know is, as part of reconciliation, as part of it, any money earned as part of advertisements during this stream, any Patreon supports that we get. If you hit any of those buttons on Twitch that send money our way, if you go down below Twitch and hit a donate button, any money sent is going to go to the Eagle's Nest Family Shelter in the Stoney Nakoda Nation near Morley. They do really wonderful work. They're so grateful for all of your support. They accept checks and gift cards in the mail if you want, and I will put their information in the Twitch stuff. You can go to there and you can see how to get a hold of them that way. But if that seems like a lot, we are, Jessia and I are here to facilitate that. Again, any money you send, we are going to put into a check in the mail and send it on that way. And so please do generously, as Jessia and I are not taking any cut from this whatsoever. Yeah. In other news, it's Pride Month, so happy Pride. I hope you're doing well. I know that I am pansexual and trans-identifying and you have your own queer history that I don't know if you want to talk about. Uh, there, you can hear him now. Thank you, reporting.
Oh,
I appreciate that. You want to say that again, Josiah?
I do. Yeah, I mean, I feel like my queerness is perhaps like pretty differently constituted, but like, I moved from wondering what I am to saying, oh yeah, like comfortably bi, to just liking queerness as a just general category. I mean, I don't really care about the gender of my partners, and I'm pretty apathetic towards my own gender identity.
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting that news. Thank you for that news, everybody. Really appreciate it. There's a lot of moving parts, and we're both getting used to it. We're almost on all the preliminaries. I want to do one more thing. It was almost a year ago that Josiah and I and so many else, maybe in here, were out on the streets of Banff rallying for Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd murder. And I mean, isn't it a reminder of the cycle of things that here we are a year later, and this is a different story and a different set of circumstances, and everything else. But here we are. Everybody is once again talking about murdered folks, in this case, Indigenous folks. And my goodness, right?
Yeah,
So,
just really reifies the importance of like racial justice and equity right now. We've clearly been dragging our feet on that. We have so much work to do.
so much. So much. So let's start doing it. Let's start doing it.
Let's try.
Let's start doing it. So, Josiah, you're a guy, you're always getting around Banff. You pop up all the time. You're doing all these things. Like, you seem, from my perspective, to have your hand in like everything. What? Give us a. What's that about? What do you do?
It gets harder and harder to define over time. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I came to Banff very similar as a lot of other people. Just got sick of Ontario. It wasn't very affordable. Um, but yeah, I feel like I just started taking on more and more the more I noticed the way life was in Alberta and Banff specifically. And I feel like I get like this, like I'm like a very loud voice in the room. But I mean, a lot of what I do is taken from the kinds of community organizing that I noticed when I first moved here. And I just kind of tried to find better ways to, organize and instrumentalize it. And that turned into Overheard, which turned into me having something resembling a media career, to what I do now, which is I work with a lot of activist groups, kind of trying to build accountability processes, planning direct actions. Um, yeah, it is pretty it's pretty wide, and I don't want to say all encompassing, but it does take up a lot of time.
Yeah, it has this appearance for maybe folks that don't know you, and I know it has for me in the past. I'm like, oh, there's Josiah again. What is he doing now? This is. But I mean, from my perspective, you're always on the right side of things. So,
Thank goodness.
what are some of your current projects in Banff?
In Banff, I really want to start building Banff tenants, which I started in May and then started experiencing my own housing chaos with the recent passing of Darren, the dessert, which is like an unspeakable tragedy. It's such a loss for our community. And it's really just hard to know that I just met him and then to lose him and see the impact of that is just unbelievable.
Yeah, that deeply felt loss in this community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I really do want to focus on tenant organizing going forward. That's kind of the summer project, and hopefully we can build something good that's gonna gain us back some of that autonomy.
It's a big deal in Banff, right? With all
Oh
the.
yeah.
Oh, you go ahead.
Oh no, no, it is, and it's like these issues of economic justice are so closely tied to some of our other social issues, including substance use.
Yeah, like I mean, really, like if you have this opinion as you're watching this, that like when are they going to get to the substances and drugs? I mean, we're actually already there. It may not really seem like it, but all of this is linked.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, like I'm not too sure how to qualify. Like the culture of drug use in Banff is very different from, other parts of Alberta and, just other places generally. We have a very different profile to our drug use, but very similar to other places. Yeah, it's tied up in economic justice. When you have people, developing, problems with alcohol and substances, that's those are diseases of despair, um, and they come from somewhere, and it's our social conditions.
Maybe this is a good time for it. Like, can you talk to us about what is the profile of substance and drug use in Banff? Like paint
Yeah,
us a picture.
I mean, I guess I'll tie in some of my own kind of drug history that I think perhaps echoes some other folks in a similar position. But back in Ontario, I grew up kind of surrounded by counterculture, and smoking weed and doing mushrooms and acid and whatever else is relatively commonplace, and a common experience among other people I knew. There's like some rave subcultures and this and that, and as you kind of move into university, people get a little bit more wilder. But I mean, when you come to Banff, if you think about the kinds of people that might be using drugs that come here, they're coming from all across the Commonwealth. They're kind of riding the coattails of the previous drug culture, which was, pretty like, you know, the like a kind of like a Banff Vice vibe. It felt a little bit like Miami, all the swingers, and tons of coke or whatever else. But I think all those things have kind of come together to create a party culture that fuses, festivals, raves, and what we already had here into something that has a pretty unique profile relative to other municipalities in Alberta.
So, I mean, for me, it's an interesting situation here in town because if you said, "Hey, Aurora, can you name one person?" I would actually be probably unable to do so.
Huh.
Right? There's this sense in Banff that this community is so split, and I wondered if you can talk to that.
Yeah, it is pretty split. I mean, it's got some like big city problems, but also small town social dynamics. And I think part of that's due to workplace culture. Like you see like all these very atomized groups forming out of workplaces or staffacons, and then when they build those friendship groups, they just kind of stick. Um, and yeah, you don't have a lot of intergenerational contact because people are coming over, without much context for their social life. They have to rebuild that when they get here. And I think once people do that, they get pretty comfy and they don't tend to socialize beyond their circle, which is relatively normal, I think. But the idea that we have that kind of small town, inclusive kind of community feel, it's not totally there. Um, and I think the town's made a lot of efforts to try and improve that. And I would love to see the ultimate fruits of that. But like many things, it's a long way to go. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we have to, maybe keep in mind with all of this is a thing I tell my students all the time is that, we're trying to get somewhere. We're trying to start here and get there. We're going down a hallway, say. And as long as we keep going in this direction, we're on the right track, right? And simply because we're not at the end yet doesn't have to be necessarily a cause for despair or to give up or anything like that, because we can turn around and
Yeah.
see how far we came. The trick is to keep
Mhm.
going.
Yeah, and there's so many opportunities for doubt for trying new ideas. But it's I don't know, it feels a little bit bad faith because we've given a lot of opportunity for bad ideas to iterate and kind of like adjust to their own failures. But like when we come forward with something that feels new and fresh and corrective, there's a lot of resistance, because it poses a challenge to the way we live now. But a lot of things have done that, like COVID. That's been a pretty
Yeah.
serious challenge the way we live. But you know, rather than have things forced on us, why not try ideas that seem informed by justice, truth, all the things we celebrate?
Why not, right? So there's actually a comment in chat here that I think is really is good. It's on topic with this. That this person would love for the town to talk about the fact that there's drug use at all. Do you think that's a fair comment? And maybe why aren't they, if so?
Well, I mean, I think we're kind of we're between paradigms a little bit, right? Like we have the war on drugs that's very much characterized the previous legal environment, but that's changing very rapidly. So perhaps the tools and our understanding of drug use should perhaps change. um, like we're moving towards decriminalization, whether we like it or not. I mean, Vancouver's already decriminalized. If you talk to the police, they'll tell you that they're changing how they consider things like possession. So things are changing whether or not we want to. But like the actual acknowledgement that there's drug use in town, I feel like you do see like inklings of it. We did have some outreach by the town. I forget the exact name of it, but yeah, the Bow Valley fentanyl kind of awareness campaigns. But as far as like culturally specific solutions to substance use, you don't see a lot of that.
Now, you mentioned actually Vancouver police, and this is relevant. There's a thing I was going to mention. If you saw my Facebook post this morning, I posted a photo of, well, I can put it up. I posted this photo, right? And if you're not aware, this photo is our RCMP here in Banff after a multi-million dollar, I can't even say it without laughing, mushroom bust. So, and this is
Ooh.
a picture of their truck and $1 million of mushrooms. There, I mean, to my eyes, it looks like a trophy. Like this is you know,
Yeah,
um,
that's those are some bagged parties there.
yeah. Uh, what I mean, okay, and I knew this would happen, but also, I think it's important to talk about. This got a lot of online reaction at the time, and and also, this morning when I posted it and everything else, like, what is wrong with this photo? Because I'm certain that there are people that are going to watch this video or are watching the stream right now and they're like, that makes sense. This is the cops doing their job. Like, this is, yeah, we got it. We got it. Right. But what's wrong with this?
Well, I mean, the problem is that the cops are doing their job. It's just their job is it's not defined for our social circumstances and our understanding at all. I mean, as far as the relative risk from a bunch of mushrooms versus even just booze, I mean, it's completely negligible. You can't get addicted to mushrooms. They might change your mind in not the greatest ways if you're not doing it properly, but the way you respond to like safety concerns with psychedelics especially is by creating better social and cultural environments for it and helping people understand that, yeah, perhaps eating a bunch of mushrooms and going to work isn't a good idea. Like it's not too hard to build like like reduced harm drug cultures. Like people are going to do drugs. So like yeah, the police animating their like their previous mandate to just go out and get all the drugs. It seems silly because yeah, that cost them probably, yeah, it's millions of dollars in mushrooms, but it also might have cost a lot of taxpayer money to do that. Money that perhaps would have been better spent on harm reduction outreach addiction services.
Yeah, I think, there's a chat comment here too about does it make anybody else uncomfortable the way that law enforcement brags about butts? And I will absolutely say it kind of does for me. It's like, don't, why is law enforcement bragging? I don't think they kind of ever should about anything.
No, no, no. I mean, even locally, some of the drug coverage feels a little bit Hollywood. I mean, because we do have the Highway 1 right here, so when they make reports of drug busts done regionally, it's always like, busted all these people carrying all these dangerous drugs in Banff. But like, that's not reflective of our own drug culture. That's kind of sensationalizing, a larger issue that's probably tied to organized crime. There are parts of the black market that aren't good. So, I mean, maintaining that criminality is just driving that problem too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And speaking of maintaining criminality, last week, for those of us that were paying attention, we may have seen the news that the United Conservative government stopped safe consumption sites or moved safe consumption sites or moved them in an effort to stop them, if you're reading between the lines. And
Mhm.
what about that?
It's honestly that's one of the most depressing developments that's happened in a really long time. For those that know me, they know that I kind of dropped everything in November. I quit a salary job with free accommodation and relative comfort, to say screw it. I'm dropping everything after hearing what's happened in Lethbridge, losing a critical service like that, and it is critical. The Lethbridge overdose, like the Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society was kind of built out of their safe consumption site being closed for what have been revealed to be blandly ideological reasons. And they're using, I forget the name of the report, but they kind of just manufactured this report that denies reality, frankly. And then they, found like what appeared to be some financial misdoing by Arches, which came before Lethbridge Overdose Prevention. That's the hardest. I should just say LOPS, Lethbridge Overdose Prevention Society, LOPS. Sweet. But anyway, what came before that was Arches, and a lot of those people just kind of rallied together and tried to go back to serving the people that they wanted to because they're fearful that people were going to die, and they did. I mean, when I was there, and I think there was, a step up in lockdown, right around November, December. So we stopped doing outreach for a few weeks, and like a week after we stopped doing outreach, we got all kinds of reports about, people overdosing and having to, jab themselves 3 or 4 times with, naloxone to get out of it. And now we just see it all over the province. Yeah, they're losing, their safe consumption sites in Calgary, Edmonton, right? Like it's all over the place. And what they're doing is saying like, yeah, we want to move towards, a recovery model, and we still want these services, but we want them to be delivered in a reliable way. But it's super disruptive. And at least in Lethbridge's case, I mean, a lot of drug users came to trust the Arches staff. In fact, some of the Arches staff were former users themselves that had kind of been, brought into stability, and then they turned around and started serving, the population that they used to be very much a part of. So I don't even know where we go from here outside kind of fighting back. I mean, if they're going to take these services away, you got to respond to direct need, because people are going to die because of these decisions.
Yeah, and I mean that really is it, right? It's these safe consumption sites aren't promoting drug use, right? We're
No.
keeping people alive, and
Yeah.
um, it's really upsetting, and I think it's, I should add too, I think it's equally upsetting when we see comments like, well, they just want people to die, and I think that that's probably not true. I think I'd
No.
probably say it's categorically not true. It's not too long ago that, many of us probably, that would be on the side of many things that we are, got all up in arms about the United Conservative Justice Minister saying that Rachel Notley and the left wanted COVID to kill people, which was an obscene thing to say. And I think that if that's an obscene thing to say, then saying that the other side wants people to die is equally obscene. And we can have these conversations about these things as you're doing right now, I think, without devolving to this obviously untrue rhetoric.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like kind of remiss to like, I wish that we had better provincial solutions to look forward to. Um, right now we don't though.
No, no, no,
No, flatly don't.
no. There's another question, like, was there misuse of money in Lethbridge, or was that just a thing that they used to do the thing?
Yeah, so what happened was, so they said that there was, this missing like $1.5 million, and that they were spending money on lavish parties and travel. And when you looked at it, it did seem like the executives perhaps were taking more than they should. But that like $1 million that was missing, the police found it like not too long after. Like it wasn't like some big mystery. They found it pretty quickly. Um, and like all those lavish parties were just like staff events at pizza parlors. Like they weren't lavish. So yeah, like plainly ideological.
Yeah, and I mean that doesn't sound even abnormal to me. It's like, staff event at a pizza parlor, that is an everyday business organization thing that everybody has, money to do for a reason, right? Your work doesn't have to be
Yeah.
synonymous with hellish.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Flatly does not.
Um, Yeah, I think we can. Yeah, so there's another question in chat here that I'm going to bring up. I think we have to be careful about this, but I
Mm-hmm.
think we should. And the chat asks, would you mind talking about psychedelics, indigenous use, and colonialism? Now, I believe that this is about this idea that, psychedelics in particular are outlawed. If I know my history right, and you can correct me on this, maybe Josiah, is that Puritan groups and stuff like that didn't like that other people were doing these things, and it didn't really fit with their thing. And so they, even though there's not that much harm about them. They were like, well, that doesn't fit with our beliefs, so we're going to impose that on you because we don't like you as.
Um, yeah, I mean, my knowledge of like the specific law criminalizing mushrooms is perhaps not as fine as other people's, but yeah, I mean, there was a flat disconnect between the powers that be, whether they be economic or religious, and people's actually their substance use and practice. And there's always been this mismatch, like since I don't know how far back to go, but yeah, we have an apparent problem with these things, and then we outlaw them, and then we don't realize the damage that comes along with it. I'm not too sure how much else I have to say about that. Like it's yeah,
And I think, I know that maybe somebody in chat can tell me the exacts, but I know that there are, in Canada at least, there are drugs that have been over the past 150 years of, there have been drugs that have been outlawed solely because Indigenous folks use them. There
mhm,
are drugs that have been outlawed for Indigenous folks, but not white folks. I actually think alcohol was one of those,
yeah,
where white folks were allowed to sell, or settler folks were allowed to sell alcohol, but Indigenous folks were not,
mhm,
because of this racist belief that the Indigenous folks are just going to get drunk and addicted, and the settler folks are going to use it responsibly, which is, I mean, that's trash. Let me just
yeah,
put that out there, that is just trash. Uh,
yeah.
um,
Flatly trash.
yeah,
Even like the way like weed, like the weed discourse in the states, like the fact that they like started referring to it as marijuana was to like make it seem a little bit like they're like almost orientalizing it. It was something that the folks below the border were doing and bringing up with them. Like that was very much part of the discourse then.
yeah. You may know this too. I mean, I admit my American roots are showing here, but I know in America that, I think fairly famously, drugs that are, tied largely to uh, white folks, say in this case cocaine, are less criminalized than drugs that are tied largely to groups of color, in this case, say crack, which is the same drug just about. And there's something like 20 times stiffer penalties for crack use than there is for cocaine use. Is there similar stuff to that in Canada that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. Not well, perhaps not to the same degree. But yeah, no, things are certainly criminalized differently along racial lines here. You don't have to go very far to see it. Um, you can see it in any major city center. They use drugs to kind of criminalize racialized populations. That's definitely happened here too. But on the like the kind of mass industrialized scale with mass incarceration in the states, it's not quite constant. There's a line of difference, but it's not the greatest line of difference.
Mhm.
It's not like we've been doing fantastically over here.
No, yeah, yeah. I think it's such a Canadian pastime, right? To be like, well, maybe we're bad, but we're better than them, and
Uh,
which isn't even always true. And um, so uh, I mean, what about what has COVID-19 changed? Let's bring this back to the Bow Valley here. What has
yeah.
COVID-19 changed for us here in terms of substance abuse and drug use? I mean, COVID-19 has taken over the news cycle so much that, I mean, if you hadn't looked, you might think that there was not a single drug that got used the entirety of the last year and a half here.
Oh, and that is definitely not true. I mean, like when I did a substance use survey back in December, and people were still very much doing drugs. Like it was, the survey was served to a population that perhaps is more inclined to use drugs, but half of those people reported using coke during 2020. I mean, people aren't stopping. So what concerns me with COVID is, and I hate to say we're bringing it to the Bow Valley, then I'm going to expand it back out, but I swear there's one here. But anyway, like the COVID has interrupted international drug markets. They have not been able to smuggle things as easily, and that means there's been a reduction in supply. And what happens when you have reductions in supply is people start trying to spread what they do have further out, especially if you are distributing. So our drug supply is not the drug supply we had before COVID. It's much more toxic, and I don't think we're prepared for the possibility that we'll have a batch roll through that's tainted and not good. And I mean, we don't have as much infrastructure and services to deal with something like that. And it can be flatly disastrous if we don't make the precautions that we should be. Like if you have a bad batch of M or Coke and it goes out into 3 or 4 bags, and then a group of people use it, like there could be like upwards of a dozen overdoses. So I don't know how well prepared we are for this new drug supply regime, and it might change, and it certainly will. But even like the past 6 months or so, I try to keep some eye on pill reports and stuff. And yeah, no, there's batches of M going around with fentanyl. Like it's not the same drug supply. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, you can't even go like I don't know about the men's bathrooms, but the women's bathrooms here in town, every single one has at least one fentanyl ad in it. Um,
Mhm.
is that like, and the concern there is so high, right? You don't know if it's got in it, you don't know what's there. I know I was speaking with a paramedic who was like, yeah, we show up to a house, like, like if we are not careful, we don't even have to take that particular drug, and if it's got enough fentanyl in it, then we're in trouble. Like, are we doing adequate stuff for that?
Um, Not really. I mean, a lot of our solutions to fentanyl in the drug supply are reactive. So rather than, trying to prevent fentanyl from being ingested at all, we just kind of rely on, the good, faith of others to have some naloxone on hand and revive people. But realistically, if we had, proper harm reduction efforts, we'd be trying to burn that candle on both ends. Like if people are going to overdose, reverse it. But you can test drugs. Um, the unfortunate thing with fentanyl, though, is it's pretty difficult to test for, at least on an individual level. A lot of the test kits kind of rely on you putting, your drugs in some water and then spinning it around with the test stick, and then either letting the water evaporate out or choosing to drink your drugs, which is like perhaps people will do that, but that doesn't match how people actually use their drugs. So that's why there's a need for culturally specific solutions. Um, and the solution here requires something new. Um,
Hmm.
we need proper drug purity testing that people don't feel afraid of approaching. And that's a lot easier in an atmosphere where drugs are decriminalized.
Just as a quick question, like we're gonna move on to all that stuff that you just opened up there. Where can you get naloxone in town? Just we brought that up, so we should talk about
Oh,
that.
yeah. Yeah, go to the pharmacy. They got it. You check with your local health authorities, pharmacies. They know the problem, and they stock themselves. If you don't know
Yeah,
how to use it, they offer training on how to. Perhaps not now, but soon. Um, it's essential medicine.
yeah. Okay, so we're gonna take like not a break, but we're gonna have a moment here as a whole, um, and we're gonna do a little bit of music, and then on the other side of music, we're going to get into solutions for all this. We're gonna dream. We're gonna come up with ways that we can actually make things better. We're gonna work on the problem a little bit as much as we can here. So I'm gonna play a piece on the piano. It's interesting. I'm gonna play this piece by Ravel that has been in my repertoire for a long time. And when Josiah and I were talking about this a month ago, I was like, I think this will fit really well in here as sort of a tribute to people that have lost their lives and or livelihoods or well-being or anything like that. And then of course we had this Kamloops residential school discovery. And the piece that I'm going to play roughly translates to Peace for Dead Babies. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I mean, I'm gonna do it. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Um, and so like I'm gonna do it, but we're gonna we're gonna do it for that instead, I think. And what I hope is that everybody listening can just take a moment and reflect on what we said so far, or this current news story, um and we'll go from there. This is also a really wonderful time to remind everybody that any proceeds from this are going to Eagle's Nest Family Shelter in the Stony Dakota Nation. If you're watching on Twitch, there's a donate button down there. Stream Elements gives me 100% of it, and then 100% of that is going to go over there. So if you want to, you can check out their social media, which I'm going to put in chat. mail them a check, mail them gift cards for groceries or pharmacies, that kind of stuff. They would love to have that directly from you. But if you want to do a couple clicks and get it done, and you send money this way, that money will all get sent onto them. They do amazing, great work out in First Nation. So I think we'll move on. We will do this song. I'm gonna open up this piano here, and I do hope you enjoy. And by enjoy, I mean reflect and and consider and talking while my Surface turns on. It's important. There we go. I hope that gave you a moment. I hope that gave you a moment. And yeah, yeah. Let's get back to Josiah. Um, all right. Also, let me catch up on this. There's hey, so there is
Yeah,
yeah,
we had some
there is
discourse
some
in the comments
interesting
there.
yeah, there is some interesting chat here. One of the rules of this channel is that you pretty much have to follow my values to be here. And we can't tell if you're joking necessarily, so don't do it if you're a little bit touchy. And we're going to ask individual to just please take a moment, some listening, and let's have a moment of not talking and not carrying on that conversation. I really don't want to go into my odd powers. Um, However, I hope that
Thank you for that, by the way. That was
oh,
beautiful.
I love that piece. That piece has been in my repertoire for since university, and I don't know about you, but I like let me put this over here. I have to that was something that I don't know that felt different to me. There was a re like I don't know about you, but for me there was this reclaiming of this, you know, deceased French guy who lived a very colonial lifestyle and kind of putting it up to that song instead. I don't know. I felt a little bit different, and I hope that people.
Uh, I think it comes through. You can definitely tell when some critical circumstances are inflicted on just how something was developed and performed, and it carries through time, which is nice.
So let's see here. Well, just give me 1 second. I'm just going to say say goodbye to this person temporarily, and we'll see how that goes. Okay. If that person would like to come back and engage in good faith in the conversation, they're certainly welcome, and I hope you will. Um, really wonderful. Okay, as promised, we are going to uh, talk about solutions and stuff like that. And I know that you and I, especially you, are big advocates for a strategy called harm reduction. What is that? Like let assume people don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it should be considered like a part of the continuum of care for mental health and substance use, rather than focusing strictly on getting people away from having problematic relationships with substances. It focuses more on reducing any potential harms with substance use, so that it's safer. You save lives straightforwardly that way, but it's also a lot easier to get people to move towards recovery if they're in an environment where they're already feeling safe. So it does, like, efforts that try to reduce harm, at least to me, represent kind of a net benefit. You're not going to stop people from using substances necessarily, but if you can stop people from dying from their use, that's a huge step forward. And if you can reduce the incidence of sexually or blood transmitted viruses as well, I mean, like, that's another added bonus.
Hmm. Excuse me. So in that vein, dream big. Let's take off the table what's possible or realistic or whatever. Dream big and imagine a Banff for us that solves a lot of the problems that we talked about that employs this harm reduction, right? Like what do you want to see?
If I had my way, I would like to see a tenant association gain some sort of critical mass, and then use that as a service delivery model for harm reduction. If you have a large group of people sharing their needs and what their life is, I mean, you have a better context for addressing those problems. And although we have a decent outline of what the substance use issues in town may be, you really got to start with them. You got to get them talking to each other. and move away from solutions that require us to, export people into Calgary, where they enter recovery programs with people that, have long-standing issues with meth, opiates, and other things. We do have people that develop problems with opiates locally. I mean, if you get into, a ski or outdoor recreation accident and end up hooked on painkillers, we're not an exception. That happens here too. Um, but if I were to, if we had something large and, solidarity building like a tenant association, it would be easier to instrumentalize things like peer support groups. It'd be very easy to assess people's needs, and you can react to that very realistically. And if we don't need things like drug purity testing because the drug culture, like it's just not there, then like, cool, you can make that need. But if it is needed, then yeah, it becomes a very efficient model for building harm reduction. And I think at least locally, we need not as wide a continuum of service as say a place like Lethbridge or Calgary, but we're also a smaller municipality. So I just see, building, the autonomy of people locally to try and address these issues on their own terms is a very easy, effective, and very cost-effective way of moving towards a culture where we don't worry about, losing friends suddenly, and it takes a bit of the lottery out of substance use in a big way. And yeah, that's kind of the ground that I'd like to see built. What happens after? I don't want to project too far into the future because we don't really know what's around the corner, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, if you're anything like me, you can't book ahead for next week at this point. Um,
No.
would you like to see like a more broad scale decriminalization?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a lot of fear about doing it in Banff because we don't want to be perceived as, the place you go to do drugs. However, I mean, I think that we can scaffold that process in such a way. I mean, we manage people's expectations when they come here as best we can. But I mean, if we move towards decriminalizing and had the services to support that, it would be a little bit easier, especially if other municipalities move towards decriminalization, which you can't necessarily expect. But I, I don't want to be over optimistic, but I do suspect it's down the pike. So, I mean, that's how I imagine our future. If there's no decriminalization, there's not going to be a lot of progress along a lot of fronts anyway. So I think we really should begin with that hope.
I don't know if you're how much you're watching chat too, but there's an individual watching right now. It is the 4-year anniversary of their arrest and hitting rock bottom, and I have two things I want to say about that, and maybe you'd like to go as well. First of all, thank you for sharing, and I'm glad that you feel safe enough to share that in this space. Um, and second, I hope that I mean, I'm assuming that when you say you hit rock bottom 4 years ago, that it has been at least somewhat better, and I truly hope that for you. I felt so compelled to respond to that message, and I don't know if you do.
Yeah, that I didn't see it, but that's huge. I mean, if you can mark your turnaround and you're making progress, hell yeah. And yeah, feeling brave enough to share it here, also hell yeah. Like
Yeah.
I like hearing people be more open about their experiences. And I like the idea of like, hitting rock bottom being brought up because that raises a kind of a critical problem that I've noticed with Banff is that people like I mentioned earlier that people here aren't like hardened meth users or anything. However, very often people begin their problematic relationships with substance use or accelerate them while they're here. And the equivalent of hitting rock bottom in Banff, which happens quite frequently, is things kind of spiraling a little bit out of control. You lose your job, which likely means you lose your house, and now you are kind of left with substance use issues and no home or money. So people kind of bottom out here, but then we export the problem elsewhere. So we don't feel as like we don't see the as pressing a need to support those people because they don't stay around.
It goes back
Um,
to that two community thing, doesn't it? Right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
well, those are
I
other
think
people.
yeah.
It's all them. So,
hmm There's all kinds of otherization that happens here too. I mean, like the discourse over who like what a local is completely silly, and it's kind of tied up in these problems too. We would have better ways of addressing these problems if we had a more stable population. Um, but we don't. So these problems just kind of get milled through as if they're not there.
So yeah, yeah. And then I want to go back a little bit. We got a little bit sidetracked there. I think very importantly sidetracked. Not all side paths are, aimless or whatever, right? I think it's
I
very
feel like my
important.
whole life is side paths.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean that's so often where like the meat of things is, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
these things. But I want to bring it back. I asked you to dream of, what can Banff look like? And I mean, that's so big. It's so interlinked, right? Like we've got
Yeah.
like sustainable tennis organizations. We've got massive policy change on the provincial or federal front. We've got a completely different support structure within the municipal town of Banff, right? Can we, how can we do that? Because that is huge. And I feel like, I'm hearing my own piano teacher saying this terrible joke of, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. And
Mm-hmm.
so what's a bite of this?
I mean, moving forward on any of those fronts, it can be very hard to bully the province or the federal government to do much. However, yeah, you can start sharing stories with your neighbors. I think that's especially important right now. I recently wrote a piece. I forget exactly how I titled it, but it was drinking grape juice but wanting wine. Um, Lately, I mean, our social makeup has been really thrown into flux because of COVID. And we haven't had as many of those opportunities to get together and share stories and catch up in a realistic way. But I think part of those discussions will be sharing traumas and getting used to sharing traumas. And I think that's perhaps a much easier cultural shift than, say, pushing the municipality to decriminalize drugs. And that's still important work. That's incredibly important work, and it's something we can all do. I think we should move into a period of what I'd like to call radical honesty. Um, Everybody kind of like they're like, oh, you're so vulnerable and open. It's like just I'm not afraid of speaking truth, and you shouldn't either.
Hmm. Did you see recently there was our local RCMP detachment put out a survey of what you would like to prioritize? Did you
Mm-hmm.
happen to see any drug related stuff on that?
I mean, I remember like entering a discussion with the detachment about trying to build harm reduction services. So yeah, I spoke with the sergeant over there about my hopes, and we kind of had a nice back and forth. And I don't want to say that directly led to them reaching directly to the overheard and Banff community, but I was I was surprised and happy to see that process go forward. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're still kind of waiting on the other side of that public consultation what they're actually going to do. So in my discussions with them, yeah, substance use was absolutely a factor. Um, but as far as their exact motivations, oh, no, I don't know everything.
Hmm. So maybe what I'll do actually, if you're listening and that interested you, I think it was a fairly open-ended request for information. So I
Sorry.
will post, oh, you're fine. So I will post, at least in the video description when this goes on YouTube, I'll post a link to that request. It'll be out there still. And maybe if this is motivated you to be like, hey, this is a thing I can do. I can we here in Banff are in a situation where our local RCMP detachment asks for feedback. So we can give them feedback. We can go, hey, well, let's think about more harm reduction strategies. Let's not repeat, that, this photo. Let's not repeat this, right? Like
No.
let's let
And
that go.
it's a huge opportunity too, because I mean, like, yeah, we're a national town that gets a lot of attention. So if our local detachment starts making very progressive moves, it's a huge symbol, I think. So I'm really, really, really hopeful that they take some of that public consultation and instrumentalize it in ways that perhaps they're scared of,
Hmm.
but that we shouldn't be.
Yeah. And it's very lengthy. There's a very a comment that I'm not gonna read in chat just because it's so lengthy. It's really important though, and it brings up another question. So in all this talk about substances and everything else, we haven't actually really spoken about alcohol.
Mm.
What do we have? We got 150 bars downtown. I mean, like, should we?
Yeah, no, drinking is a hard one because honestly, it's often a larger issue than many of the substances you see in town. And that's why I think like having better access to public space or, more reasonable freedoms in your own home might actually help fix these things a little bit. A big problem for a lot of people is they don't really have access to common space that they enjoy sharing or that they have as much autonomy in. So what you end up doing is going to the bar.
Hmm.
If we had other spaces available that people felt excited about, that might not necessarily be the case. Like perhaps they'll, I don't know, choose anything else.
Yeah. I love
But you have to create
how
those.
yeah, I love how broad your solutions are. That it's like this huge network. You know, everything is interrelated. When you think about it, you know, you're bringing up uh, rental rights, and you're bringing up common spaces, and you're bringing up, you know, law enforcement and legislation and everything. And it really is. It's so interconnected. I mean, it's this constant reminder of just how interconnected everything is. All these things are, you know, and
Yeah.
you know, whatever the topic we're discussing, right? Like,
Yeah, I try not to have too much cognitive dissonance in what I believe. And for me, like once you cross some Rubicons, like there's almost no choice but to develop things a bit more compassionately. And yeah, that requires expansive change.
so okay, so yeah, again, with that in mind, you've already given us one, which is just like talk to people.
Mhm.
What are your three things? What are your three things we can do?
Oh, it's hard to itemize, I think. Let's see. Yeah, yeah, like definitely get talking. Um, and so three things specifically to build towards harm reduction.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, everybody should order drug test kits. Everybody should probably stop sharing bills. If you don't know what that means, like, yeah, if you're using the same rolled up bill to snort your Coke, um, just get some straws instead. That's a very, very simple thing you can do to reduce the spread of hepatitis. And go to the naloxone trainings. I've gone to a few of them, and I like got some friends too. And every time they went, they noticed that the crowd was more mixed than it should be. Perhaps there wasn't as much representation within the actual drug using community. Um, that it didn't inspire the most confidence in me to hear that. So I think educate yourself. Absolutely, and do that together. Absolutely.
It sounds so much to me like that example brought to mind one of the things that we always or I always and we always talk about when it comes to 2S LGBTQ plus advocacy, which is, you know, whether it relates to you or not, speak up, speak out, go learn, do things, take labor onto yourself,
Hmm.
right? You know, it's one thing if a bunch of if a information session is attended by a bunch of substance users, and that's good. But it's entirely another thing if folks who aren't substance users go there too, and not
Hmm.
just learn, but also interact with their neighbors in ways maybe they haven't already, and humanize and stop the othering of entire segments of our community in Bow Valley.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. Uh, I think kind of both things should still happen. I think we should see better representation among people who use drugs in these workshops, but don't stop the other people from coming at all.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, you are absolutely right, and that is definitely worth noting. Um, yeah.
yeah. I always tell people, you know, if you're going to get political, if you're going to go into activist spaces, generally social media is not a great place to go. And I know you have a completely, not a completely different view, but a modified view of that. You have really turned social media into like a local art form, and I wondered if you might talk about that a little bit.
I like to think of it as a science. However, I'll appreciate that you see art in it. I mean, a lot of like my understanding of social media was built out of my academic work. I studied a lot of online identity formation stuff, principally around the ascendant far right movements we see. But there's points of comparison, And near the end, I switched to focusing on emergency management communications policy, which is a nice way of saying when shit goes wrong, what do you say and how do you say it? But what I noticed in like that, so like I tended to focus on social media emergency management, which is obviously a little bit new. And there's a lot of useful ways to instrumentalize social media beyond just memes and shit. However, it does require some conscious understanding of how social media works now. And that requires keeping on top of it. And that's why, we have like designated social media managers within corporations and stuff. It's because it is hard to understand the ways in which these spaces are changing and the role they play in our lives. We often don't fully understand them or the consequences of them. I mean, take Facebook, which, yeah, I feel like I've built a reputation as a Facebook personality, which is apparently a thing. um, but yeah, like it's not all even in online organizing spaces at all. I mean, a lot of times on Facebook, like a lot of things happen through groups. Like you can't speak about Facebook groups like they're a monolith. I mean, during the uprisings last year, there was a lot of like kind of blatantly like astroturfed groups to build up anti-mask animus. But meanwhile, you also saw people using Facebook to organize mutual aid networks. And first, people that don't know mutual aid, it's just a simple term to refer to people just willfully helping one another with no money involved. And we saw that locally too. I mean, we didn't call it mutual aid because, yeah, I don't think people pay attention to, anarchist models of organization locally. But I mean, that's what we did. People built those networks, Canmore Stone Soup and a few other places. I mean, that was their focus, and it was emergent, it was quick, and it was effective. So social media can be instrumentalized to organize, but don't think that it's going to do it on its own. It never ever will. You need to scaffold those tools with actual principles and a bit of know-how. Absolutely, like
And I suspect
it should
that
be
we,
enough.
and I suspect that we both would agree that the practice of say doom scrolling is only going
Mm.
to sink your energy. And if you're not sure what that is where we get on our device and we sorting through just reading the bad news of the day all day long, and that kind of thing. I would suspect we agree
Yeah,
is worse than
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely spent a lot of time doom scrolling last April and May.
yeah.
But yeah, it can be pretty defeating, and that's why I think like you have to very much like our relationship with substances, we have to develop better relationships with social media, and there's so many ways to do that, and it's going to manifest itself differently for different people. But we have to go into that without understanding. If having constant notifications is driving you nuts, turn them off.
Yeah.
And find ways to get social media to do what you want it to do rather than what it's doing to you.
Turning off notifications is one of the most powerful things. Oh my gosh, yeah. When you discover that you can leave a conversation by just turning off notifications and walk away and never think about it again,
Oh,
it is yeah,
glorious.
yeah.
I have a really hard time letting things stand, but not having notifications helps me move away from that a little
It is
bit.
such a big deal because you log back on, you see a little red thing pop up or whatever, and you're oh, gotta go check it, right? But that's the whole point of it.
Yeah, it's engineered to feel like a lottery. I feel like I saw something in the chat, but I don't know what
Yeah,
it
you
was
did.
now.
I've
Yeah.
uh, I've been gonna do it. We were gonna flip already. So you're an announced council candidate.
Hmm.
I suspect we're gonna hear a lot about this kind of thing in your campaign.
Hmm.
Do you
Absolutely.
think Banff does a good social media job, maybe in reference to the harm reduction and getting the word out about what we've been talking about, not in general?
Um, you know what? Like, I think the town has like a little ways to go with how they use social media and outreach and stuff. But like, I don't want to be too critical because it's still like quite a bit better from other places you see. We do have okay access to the people on council. I've never found it terribly hard to get in contact with them. Um, but yeah, there's definitely room for refinement. I'll probably avoid going too deep into detail here. I might get myself in trouble.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move on to the last thing, but I want to make sure that if there's anything you've been burning to get out there, you've got a last chance. So
Oh no, yeah, I'm not too sure like what's the most like adamant thing I want to get out there. Hmm.
That's fine. That's maybe there's nothing. Maybe it'll come up while we're doing this thing because Josiah and I are going to share some music together with all of you folks that are listening, and we hope that you will uh, enjoy it. You know, it's been this has ranged a long way from heavy, and so we want to end with some music that is both meaningful and also hopefully a little lighter for you. And if you like it, I'm probably going to post a video so you can do your own because this is a pretty simple little formula that we're gonna fill in. So what are we doing here? Just
So we're gonna sing a rendition of "Popular Wobbly," which is a song that was made by T-Bone Slim. It was a hobo and a labor activist back in the early days of the 20th century. And what it was is it was an adapted song based on like a very popular hit at the time. And it was a common strategy within the industrial workers of the world to adapt popular songs or church music to kind of reorient it towards some social justice. So yeah, this song was born out of that, but it's been covered and redone and rewritten over the decades, and it's a very fun song.
yeah, it was funny. You told me like I insist that we do this, and I was like, all right. And I listened to it, and I have to admit I didn't get it at first. I had to listen to a bunch of renditions to really understand what was going on because you know it's going to say over and over again, you know, they or some person, some individual goes or wild over me, right? They went wild, they go wild over me, over and over again,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and for my take on it, it's a song about folks living their lives when kind of the dominant culture or whatever doesn't really want them to, right? And by go wild, they mean they push back or they get all angry or they make a news story about it or whatever else, right? And
yeah,
that's when I finally was like, oh, I get it. But you know, what do
yeah.
you?
It's kind of funny. Like the original song that they're kind of like riffing on is like kind of like a body song. It's it's usually sung by often sung by a gorgeous woman describing how local men are going wild over her. um, so yeah, I think it takes that very straightforward meaning of they go wild over me, um, but then it kind of twitches it a little bit slightly and forces you to fill in some blanks. Like there's a few prominent characters in the many renditions of Popular Wobbly, but they tend to, it's often, bosses, landlords. So the idea of a cop going wild over you is very different from the local men in town going wild over you. So it's a nice spin on it.
Yeah. So we have both. We have both of us made up our own verses that will go in our own time. I also want to remind you, as somebody just did a very generous donation that's going to go to Eagle's Nest Women's Family Shelter. Sorry, that we are any money that's donated is going straight over to them. If you click, if you're watching on the Twitch stream and see that donate button down beneath, I get 100% of that, which means that they get 100% of that. Alternately, you know, you can put a check in the mail or gift cards in the mail and send it along. Eagle's Nest Family Shelter has their address well linked. I'll link it again one more time. Right. But yeah, if you want to make it much easier for yourself, send it this way. Donations, Patreon subscriptions, anything for the next week that comes into this channel, go straight. But yeah, as we said, we've got this song coming. We hope you enjoy it. We're gonna do it. This is gonna be live together, despite the internet. I hope you enjoy that. But it should be good. And I do hope you enjoy these stories that we're gonna tell. All set, my friend?
All set?
Okay.
They go wild, simply wild over me, though I ain't done no harm that I can see. I'm as gentle as a lamb, but they take me for a ram. They go wild, simply wild over me. Oh, the cop, he went wild over me. High out of my mind, obviously. When he started to get uncouth, well, I hooked him across the mouth. He went wild, simply wild over me.
They go wild, simply wild over me. Although all I want to do, you see, is pee. They shout and yell, you bore, when I touch that bathroom door. They go wild, simply wild over me.
Oh, the bosses went wild over me, accusing me of rascality. They left a lot of detail out that company-wide email. They go wild, simply wild over me.
Oh, my neighbor, she goes wild over me. When I work at school, grades 1 to 3, she asks, how can you let it be in there with my kid? She goes wild, simply wild over me. True story.
Is it now? Oh, the degens went wild over me. Moved halfway across the country to be free. Wish the landlords had less say over how they spent their day. They go wild, simply wild over me.
And the bar, they go wild over me. When I'm on a date with a lady C, they say, look at those two gals, aren't they the closest pals? They go wild, simply wild over me.
Will the roses grow wild over me as I'm laden to the land that is to be? When my soul and body part in the stillness of my heart, will the roses grow wild over me?
That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, hopefully the audience synced up, but like, yeah, that was a lot of fun.
We're gonna put the lyrics of that in the
Sure.
video description. But like, Josiah, do you want to like give a very brief chat of like what yours were about, just in case?
Oh yeah, I mean, I try to do like a little bit of a personal history. I've got an interesting relationship with local bosses and landlords. The cop versa is actually it's a real story. It's probably like a marker in my own drug use where things kind of turned around for me. Bit off more than I could chew. Ended up breaking into an industrial park and stopped by the cops. When they approached me, and I was very much out of sorts. Um, I misread their intentions and I punched one of them in the mouth. And yeah, got my ass kicked and brought to the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Being 17, oh boy.
Yeah. Oh, well, we're all glad you're here now.
Yeah.
No. And mine were I did two on kind of the trans experience. I did a bathroom joke, joke, and then I did a getting called it joke. Also not super funny, but I'm doing what I can to reclaim it. And then I did uh, two women on a date, gal pals jokes. So you know.
Yeah, I was really hoping you'd bring the queer experience into it because yeah, it's a bit of a critical anthem for the way we live, and those verses certainly haven't been written in the past. So I
Yeah,
appreciate that they've been written now.
the best of gal pals indeed, chat. Thank you. um Anyway, if you liked that song, I think I'll we'll do a write your own video, and you can do it. I think we're gonna wrap this up, my friend.
Perfect. I think that
Yeah,
went great.
yeah. How can people follow you and your work?
I'm very fortunate in that my name is extremely searchable. I think I'm the only Josiah Arsenio in the world. So if you're on any sort of service that you like, you can probably search my name and find me. I'm at Josiah Arsenio on Instagram and Twitter. If you're on Facebook uh, and you live in the Bow Valley, you probably already see my name too much anyway.
You keep a writing, I don't want to say blog, that feels not right, but you keep
Yeah,
a
I do a newsletter, which is kind of like a blog that goes to your inbox. But yeah, no, you can find my Substack. It's josiaharsenio.substack.com, or you can find my it's attached to a lot of my socials.
I did just
And
put it in
yeah, you
chat for folks.
thank you. But yeah, you can subscribe to me directly. As a writer, I try to rely as much as I can on my readers giving me dollars because that feels like it's the most accountable thing I can hope for. So if people do that, it'd be excellent.
Awesome. And thank you so much for your time today. Again, thank you for your all of you who are watching, your support for Eagles Nest Family Shelter. And any money that we take in here is going to go to them. Physically mailed checks, physically mailed gift cards for groceries and pharmaceuticals, and all of the kind of necessities are very well. They wrote me an email this morning specifically saying, we forgot to tell you, we really want these gift cards for these kinds of things. So yeah, please, please, please give as you are able and generously within that ability that you have. And yeah, thank you for listening so well and asking questions and comments and everything else. It's been a real pleasure being here with you all in chat today on Facebook or Twitch, and also it's been a real pleasure being here with you, Josiah. Thank you so very much for coming.
Thanks for having me. This has been a blast. I'm
Good.
really excited to see what else you do with this because so far it's been so good.